Good afternoon, students. My name is Gautam. Welcome to Vishnu IAS Academy. Today, we'll have a very brief presentation on the question paper of Political Science and International Relations. This would be the first impression of the paper that I have got while looking at the paper in today's exam. Now, you know that the trend of the paper was, the pattern of the paper was as usual. It contained the 150 words answers, and it contained the 20 marks answers and 15 marks answers, and of course the 10 marks answers. And question 1 and question 5 of section A and section B respectively were compulsory questions, and the students are supposed to write 3 answers from the rest of the questions. Okay. Now all the questions given in the first question are compulsory questions. And if you look at the trend of the questions, the first question was behavioral approach to political science, which is a very normal and a very straight question for which the student should not be having any problem. Behavioral evolution in political science is considered to be a trend in the post-war period when there was a lot of dissatisfaction with the traditional methods, and the people, particularly the political analysts, wanted political science to be more science oriented. They wanted political science to adopt quantitative techniques to arrive at generalizations which could be tested and proved. So the idea of behavioral approach to political science and the backlash in the form of post-behavioralism constitutes the answer for this question. Okay, this is a rather straight question without any problems. The second question is pluralist theory of state. Now, pluralist theory of state also is a recent idea of state which proposes that the state should not claim monopoly right to exercise political power and sovereignty. Power should be dispersed in various power centers in the society, because the various groups and associations of individuals have their own existence and they have their own purpose, and state should be only one among the various associations and groups sharing power with the rest of the social organizations. The pluralist theory of state is considered to be a reaction against what is called as the classical notion of sovereignty, which proposes the idea that state should exercise sovereignty and should be able to take all decisions, and which can sometimes lead to an absolute state. Therefore, this also is a very straight question without any problems. Students have an ample information about this question as well. The third question is about Locke's views on revolution. Now, Locke's views on revolution also is a very straight question. Locke has very clearly identified views about revolution. He believes that revolutions are not having any functional purpose, and Locke is very much wedded to the idea of stability. Okay, and Locke believes that individuals are given certain natural rights, and these rights are inalienable, and they constitute the very essence of an individual's humanity. Individuals will have the right to revolt against the state if these rights are violated by the state, because these rights are granted to individuals by the nature, and state is not the source of these rights. The concept of natural rights proposed by John Locke is the fundamental crux of his entire political thought. He believes that individuals are granted natural rights, and these natural rights are inviolable, and therefore the individuals retain the right to revolt against the state in case these rights are violated. Okay, so Locke therefore considers that though revolution is a destabilizing influence on society, yet individuals have or should retain the right to revolt, which is indicative of his commitment to the idea that rights granted by nature are inviolable. Okay, so Locke's views on revolution primarily aim at trying to help individuals realize their natural rights, and to prove the point that these natural rights are inviolable, and that the individuals even have the right to revolt against the state if these rights are violated by the state. Thirdly, Decline of liberalism is another question. Now please remember that this is the first question that we came across in the entire paper, which is a question which has been a topic of recent debate and discussion. Decline of liberalism in recent times is a topic which is debated primarily because of a series of trends. There has been a very large amount of dissatisfaction with the current process of globalization. Okay, and secondly, we also have seen the rise of authoritarian regimes, which have sometimes led to the impression that probably authoritarian regimes can realize people's aspirations in a much better way compared to, liberal states. For example, the rise of China and the recent success that China had experienced had been a point of discussion for a lot of people in questioning the validity of liberalism and the claim of liberalism as the best way to organize society. And thirdly, in recent times there has also been a lot of dissatisfaction with the liberal democracy, the idea of liberal democracy, okay, and the problems associated in the working of liberal democracy, the rise of populism, okay, political parties giving freebies and political parties resorting to impossible agendas to capture votes, okay, and increased criminalization of politics, and certain primordial loyalties playing a very important role in the political process in liberal democracies also had led to a lot of people question the idea of liberalism and the claim of liberalism as the best way to organize society. Therefore, these are several arguments that you'll have to mention while speaking about the decline of liberalism, and you'll also have to mention whether these fears expressed against liberalism are well founded or not, whether there are strong foundations to these criticisms against liberalism or not. Next, the linkage between power and hegemony. Okay, this is another topic which is a very conventional topic as far as political science is concerned. Obviously, a lot of people consider the power in its various dimensions. Okay, power is ability to influence actions of another and to secure favorable actions despite their non-acceptance. Even if they don't want to accept, even if they're not willing, okay, you can still extract favorable actions from them. Okay, so despite non-willingness, if somebody is able to extract favorable action, we can call that as power. So power is ability of individuals to influence others. There are of course different definitions to power. So hegemony is ability to influence thought, so that even without having to resort to exercise of force or coercion or threat of penalty, you can extract favorable action from the other person. This is called as hegemony. Okay. For example, America is powerful. America is powerful. It has economic power, it has diplomatic power, it has military power. It is able to exercise influence. It is able to influence the actions of others by use or threat of use of force. That would be power. That is coupled with American ability to reside in the minds of others as a hegemon. Okay, so it is able to influence the actions of others by way of the image that it has created for itself as the upholder of liberal values, as the protector and the bastion of democracy, as supporter of a way of life which is pluralist and which is inclusive, as protector of human rights. So these are several ways in which America tries to project itself so that a favorable image about America is built that allows America to dominate the thinking and the idea, and that would mean hegemony. So hegemony will be that type of power in which the exercise of force or coercion will not be required. So it is a dimension of power. Okay, it is this linkage that we'll have to establish in your answer between power and hegemony. Okay, so America is a powerful state. America is a hegemon as well, right? So hegemon is a country which is able to influence others by, the appeal it has, by the portrayal of its image, by the claims it could make. Okay, these make the other countries favorably disposed to act in favor of a hegemon. Okay, so ability to control ideas or dominate ideas can make a powerful country a hegemon. That's the linkage that you're supposed to write about as a part of this answer. Okay. So when we look at the questions overall, in the first question, there is nothing that is very difficult to answer. The questions are very straight. The information is amply available for students, and there is absolutely no problem for the students as far as the first answer is concerned. Now going ahead, the second question, elucidate the meanings inherent in the term political with appropriate illustrations. Now this is a very interesting question. Here we require to have a proper understanding of the word political. A good number of people tend to understand the word politics in different ways. Okay, some people consider politics as, struggle for power, okay, or the means to acquire, possess, display and exercise of power. Some people consider politics as the process of reconciliation of conflicting interests. For example, the liberal view believes that politics is the process of reconciliation of conflicting interests. Reconciliation of conflicting interests. Okay, this is the liberal view of politics, right? So, the liberals believe that politics is a process whereby the interests are articulated by various social groups, the interests are socialized, and the authority or the state will take decisions to resolve this conflict. The entire process is called as political process. Therefore, the word political or the word politics for the liberals is associated with reconciliation of conflicting interests in society, so that order is assured, order is restored. Therefore, for liberals, politics is a positive term. Okay. For another view, we call this as the power view of politics. The power view of politics. They believe that politics is a process through which power is acquired, possessed, exercised and displayed. Okay. So they believe that the entire process of politics is for acquiring power. Okay. This is what's called as the power view of politics. A good number of political thinkers like Laswell, okay, then we also have international theoreticians, okay, all of them consider politics as the process of acquiring power. Okay. Then we have the Marxist view of politics. The Marxist view of politics. The Marxists believe that politics is a part of a superstructure, not the substructure of the base, and the political process is completely subservient to the economic processes. So there is nothing like an autonomous political activity. All activities which are political are actually activities which are associated to strengthen and entrench the exploitative mode of production. Okay. So in a society we have the base of the society characterized by material conditions, and these material conditions are exploitative, and to entrench this exploitative material conditions we have a process which is called as political process. Therefore, politics for the Marxists is a part of superstructure which is primarily a process for the purpose of entrenching and perpetuating an exploitative economic base. Okay. So these are several viewpoints related to politics, and the examiner is just asking the meanings inherent in the term political. How do you understand political? The political, according to liberal, is all those activities associated with the resolution of conflicts. For the power view theoreticians, the term political includes all those activities which are associated with acquisition of power and use or exercise of power. For the Marxists, all those activities which are considered political are activities which are related to strengthening of the social base, which is the material conditions or economic conditions of society. So these are the several inherent meanings. There are a few more meanings associated with the term political, but these are the fundamental ones. If you can explain these viewpoints with appropriate illustrations, for example, when there is a demand for a separate statehood in Telangana, okay, the political process occurred in the form of different social groups articulating their interests, and state coming out with appointment of commissions, and then of course state coming out with the bifurcation law to divide the state of Andhra Pradesh into Andhra Pradesh and Telangana so that the conflict is resolved. So this entire process of resolution of conflict is called as politics under the liberal perspective. Okay, so through such appropriate illustrations you can explain the inherent meanings of the term political. Okay, this is a concept based question, and once you are having clarity about the concept you can write answer. A good number of people do not have clarity about the concept. Unless you have clarity about the concept you cannot attempt a decent answer for this question. Okay, next 2b, there is a sub question in the second question, and that is Marxism is a political theory of action demanding strict compliance with core principles. Okay, now we were asked to comment on this, right? Comment means we are supposed to explain our viewpoint on the given statement. So Marxism is a political theory of action. Okay, it's a political theory of action demanding strict compliance with the core principles. So what are the core principles of Marxism? Marxism believes in what is called as the base determines the superstructure. That is one core principle of Marxism. Another core principle of Marxism is 2, class consciousness, which leads of course to class conflict. Third, another core principle of Marxism is dialectical materialism. Dialectical materialism. Okay, now there are several other core principles of Marxism, but just let us try to take a look at these 3 important core principles and see how Marxism as a political theory is a action theory. Okay, now please remember that according to Marxists, the base of the society called the economic conditions are the prime determining factors for all social change. Okay, so if we want true change, in society, it is not enough if we change elements of superstructure like politics or religion or philosophy or literature. That would not be enough. What is required by individuals to do is to address the contradictions in the base of society, that is the material conditions or the economic conditions of society. That is where the true problem lies. That is where the contradiction lies. Unless we address the true contradictions in the base of the society, we cannot rid the society of all its contradictions. Therefore, any change that is required to be taken up is change related to the economic base of society. Okay, so base determines superstructure. So here Marxism is speaking about the need to change the economic conditions to remove the contradictions of society. Okay, therefore change and efforts to bring about a change is what Marxism is all about, right? And Marxism also believes that this change can be brought about only when class consciousness begins to dawn. Okay, that is, we all have several consciousness, isn't it? We are conscious of our nationality, we are conscious of our region, we are conscious of our community. Okay, so all these consciousness that individuals have are a part of false consciousness according to Marxism. Okay, the true consciousness is class consciousness according to Marxists. Okay, and according to Marxists, class consciousness will occur among individuals only when the conditions assume their right juncture or their right state. It is only at that right state or at the right juncture that class consciousness will dawn upon individuals. For example, according to Karl Marx, under capitalism, class consciousness will dawn on individuals only when the conditions in capitalism become intolerable and when there is no way left out it is then that individuals will slowly realize that the true contradiction in capitalism lies in the nature of the class system. Okay? This is what is called as class consciousness. At that juncture, individuals will rid themselves of all of false consciousness, the differences that they create amongst themselves on the basis of nationality or community or caste or region or religion, Individuals will shut off this false consciousness and individuals will attain their true consciousness in the form of class consciousness. It is then that the revolutionary fervor is created in society, which prompts them to action, to alter the material conditions, to create a new social order, So, these core principles, if we look at these core principles of Marxism, they all indicate at action. They all indicate at bringing about change. For Marxists, revolution is a positive influence. Revolution, according to Marxists, is the path or the way towards social progress. This is what is called as dialectical change. The contradictions in society will interplay with each other, creating a higher level of social order. Okay? And the transition of society from one epoch to another epoch is marked by revolutions, because according to Marxists, revolutions are locomotives of history. Okay? Revolutions are the true engines of social progress. Revolutions are the path through which the society will rid itself of all contradictions. Therefore, Marxism out and out is an action-based political program with certain strict principles. Okay? All these principles which Marxism proposes, principles like dialectical materialism or class consciousness or the idea that based, all these principles which Marxism proposes, these principles hint at a particular path the society travels to realize a higher social order. Okay? So, this obviously is an action theory. This is a question which is fraught with a lot of difficulty. Okay? So, students who want to take up this question will have to be very clear about the concept. Application of the concept. See, we understand what is dialectical materialism as a part of our classes. We understand what is class consciousness and how class consciousness dawns on individuals. And we also understand how, the base determines superstructure according to Marxism. So, we are aware of all these principles, but how to apply the essence of these principles to hint at the idea that they indicate action on the part of social groups is where the key to the answer is. If we can do justice to an answer, trust me, we get very, very high scores. Okay? And any attempt at writing a reasonably good answer for this type of a question will be awarded with very high marks. Trust me on this. Okay? So, that's about the second sub-question within the second question. And the third one is the nature of relationship between equality of democratic citizenship, and liberty of individuals. Liberty of individuals is influenced by economic equality. Now, please remember that the question appears to be tricky, but actually it's a very simple and a straightforward question, but apparently it appears tricky. Okay? Equality of democratic citizenship. We are all equals in terms of our citizenship. We all have equal entitlements to participate in the democratic process, like right to vote, right to, take part in political movements, right to form associations and organizations, right to criticize government, right to express our views. We have a series of political rights, okay, and we have a series of entitlements which help us participate as equals in the democratic process. Okay, this is what's called as equality of democratic citizenship. We all have this. Okay, right, and we also have liberty. Okay, we also have liberty, right? So, if we are all able to exercise liberty on equal basis, okay, if you are all able to exercise liberty on equal basis, then there is no problem with democratic participation. The problem is that we are not able to exercise liberty on an equal basis because of economic inequalities. There are certain social groups which are economically prosperous, economically advanced, who are able to exercise their liberty even more meaningfully, even more effectively. For example, a social group which is very powerful economically can organize and very powerfully articulate its interest. Okay, for example, in India, you know that the most powerful pressure groups are business organizations, Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. This is a very, very powerful business organization. Okay, why this business organizations or these business pressure groups are able to exercise a greater amount of influence is because of their economic strength. They have a lot of resources. They are able to pressurize the government to have favorable policies compared to other social groups which are not very well entrenched, which are not having proper access to resources. They are not able to influence governments in a very strong way. Okay, so though we are all having equal rights to participate in the democratic process, okay, and though we all have liberty, the liberty that individuals are able to exercise is conditioned by their economic capability and economic endowment, which of course is making equality of democratic citizenship meaningless. Have you understood this, my dear friends? Right? He is asking us to write about the nature of relationship between equality of democratic citizenship and liberty of individuals, okay, as influenced by economic equality. Okay, so as I told you, it looks like a trick question apparently, but this is very easy to answer provided you understand the essence of the question. Okay, so this question is slightly tricky. This question also is slightly difficult because we all understand the core principles of Marxism, but how to apply that to, you know, arrive at the idea of how Marxism is an action ideology. Okay, so that is about the third question, the second question, excuse me. Next, the third question. The debate on human rights is caught between the limitations of both universalism and cultural relativism. Okay, so the debate on human rights is caught between the limitations of both universalism and cultural relativism. Okay, first, you know that one fundamental component of the idea of human rights is universalism. It means irrespective of the differences in religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, or even nationality, every person who is born human being on the face of this planet deserves certain rights which are called as human rights. These are fundamental entitlements of every citizen born human by virtue of being born human. These rights are inviolable and these rights are required for a person to lead a humane life, and any violation of these human rights would be a violation of his humanity itself. Okay, and no person can live his human life in its complete fulfillment if he is deprived of these rights which are called as human rights. Now, after having understood this concept of universalism, it believes that every person who is born human being, okay, is entitled to these set of rights. Okay, that is one debate about human rights. Okay, so whether the concept of universalism can be applied to human rights or not. Now, we all know that this concept of universalism within the idea of human rights had been subjected to a lot of criticism. Okay, why? Because it is believed that individuals are endowed differently and you cannot apply the same set of rights to everybody. Okay, and secondly, there is another debate also which is about cultural relativism, which says that every society had evolved its own culture, its own traditions and customs, and every society based on its own historical experiences and its own necessities had evolved a way of life in which sometimes duties and obedience or communitarian living probably becomes more important than claims of individuals for certain specific rights. Okay, now the point is that every culture has its own way of life, and the concept of human rights is a Western construct. It's a Western construct which would be an imposition on non-Western cultures. The concept of human rights is a Western construct which would be an imposition on non-Western cultures. So every culture should be able to choose its own set of rights, okay, based on its wisdom, its historical experiences, and based on its own specific needs and necessities. Okay, so that is another debate about human rights. The concept of universalism believes that every person is entitled to rights, but what are those set of rights which we should recognize for everybody? You know that there are some people who emphasize on civil rights, there are some people who emphasize on cultural rights, there are some people who emphasize on political and economic rights. So there are diverse views on a set of human rights which can be applied universally for every person, irrespective of differences of religion, race, caste, gender, or even nationality as well. Okay, so this is about the debate related to human rights. Okay, and the concept of human rights, which is subjected to a lot of uncertainty, primarily because of the ideas of universalism and cultural relativism. And secondly, the second question in third question is, deliberative democracy seeks to promote democratic decision making about public issues among citizens. Now, the idea of democracy itself is this. Okay, the idea of democracy itself is that people should be able to decide. People should be able to decide, okay, on public issues. Okay, decision making, democratic decision making means that people should be able to decide on public issues. Okay, now please remember that in a country like India, for example, where there is a lot of illiteracy and lack of awareness about public issues, then the nature of people's participation in decision making is only marginal, isn't it? Okay, so to promote democratic decision making, we require that all the people participate in discussions. All the people have opinions which are informed opinions. Okay, and all people are given opportunity to participate in the decisions and deliberations, and thereby participate also in decision making. So democracy should not just be trying to ascertain people's opinions through counting of votes. Okay, it is through allowing every voice to be heard that you can effectively realize democratic decision making. Okay, which requires that people participate in discussions, people form informed opinions, and people are given opportunity to participate in the democratic process. All this would assure what is called as deliberative democracy. Okay, so today the nature of participation by people is primarily in the form of casting their vote or expressing their views based on hearsay, or expressing their views even sometimes in public and social media platforms without having proper information or knowledge on the issue. Okay, so for deliberative democracy to really bear fruit, what we require is we have to increase people's awareness, we have to allow people to make informed choices, and we should also provide people access to participate in deliberations and discussions. And after all this, if we arrive at decisions, it would be truly democratic decision making. So deliberative democracy is one another concept which is being very frequently being debated about in recent times. So participatory democracy, okay, in which people will participate very effectively in deliberations, okay, and take decisions, would only make democracy truly meaningful. That is the idea of deliberative democracy, and this is what you're supposed to discuss as a part of this question. Okay, it's also a very straight question, not much of a controversy related to this question as well. Okay, compared to the previous questions, this question is slightly easier. Okay. Next, fourth question. Legitimacy adds positive value to political authority and obligation. Okay, here you're supposed to write about the concept of legitimacy. Okay, legitimacy, the concept of legitimacy. Legitimacy, simply understood in layman's terms, is, power exercised legally, which leads to acceptance of people. Okay, so power which is exercised legally, which leads to acceptance of people, makes the exercise of power legitimate. Okay, so whenever there is a political authority, if the political authority is able to exercise power legally, okay, right, so through law and through legal provisions, if the power is exercised, okay, then that power becomes authority. And if this authority is accepted by people, then it becomes legitimate power. Okay, right. Therefore, acceptance of people gives value to political authority. It becomes more stable, it becomes more effective, okay, and it strengthens the political order because it's based on the acceptance, the willingness or the approval of the people. Okay, therefore any exercise of power which is legitimate, okay, adds value to authority. Okay, please remember, power exercised through legal means is called as authority, and if that political authority has willing acceptance of the people, it becomes legitimate exercise of power. Okay, so it will lend more stability, more effectiveness, as well as it strengthens the political order. Okay, this is therefore adding a positive value to political authority as well as obligation. Okay, obligation of people to the laws. If people have given their willing acceptance to the exercise of power, then the laws made by that authority also will be acceptable to the people. So it strengthens the obligation of the people to abide by or to render compliance to the laws. That's where, this statement is very true, and you're supposed to, positively support this statement. Legitimacy in every way adds positive value to political authority as well as obligation. People feel obliged to follow the laws because they have, they consider that the exercise of power was legitimate. If somebody had usurped power, seized power or usurped power by illegal means, then people's obligation towards the laws made by that authority will be weak, obviously. Okay? Therefore, legitimacy lends positive value to obligation of people to abide by the laws as well as to the exercise of political authority by those who are in positions. Okay? Next, critically examine Plato's theory of forms. Plato's theory of forms is also called as Plato's theory of ideas. Plato believes that the ideal is real, in sense that the material world that we perceive with our sensory organs is temporary, transient, imperfect, and a poor imitation of the reality. The reality lies in the world of forms or in the world of ideas. It is only through knowledge, it is only through wisdom that we can really see the world of forms. The world of forms represent the idea in its perfect, complete and permanent form. Okay? This is the world of permanence, this is the world of beauty, this is the world of goodness, and this is the world of perfection. It is only through an individual's insights into the world of ideas or forms that individuals can make informed judgments. He can assess the imperfections and see the reality of imperfections in the material world. Okay? Therefore, Plato believes that only those who are endowed with intellect or wisdom can see the world of forms. They should be entitled to rule. They should be made the philosophers, and they should be given the opportunity to wield political power. Now that's the idea expressed by Plato. This is also a very straight question without any complications, but you are asked to critically examine the Plato's theory of forms. Critically examine simply means that you got to make an examination looking at it from a positive as well as from the negative point of view. Okay. Next, Manavendra Roy, M.N. Roy's political thought highlights the humanistic aspects of Marxism. Please remember that M.N. Roy had come out with a very original and ingenious political idea called radical humanism. Radical humanism. Okay. Through this idea, M.N. Roy seeks to blend several of his Marxist influence with his ideas of humanism. Okay. And M.N. Roy believes that it is only through identifying the human being from a completely different perspective outside political ideologies like liberalism and Marxism that we can really come out with a solution to help individual realize his essence. Okay. So what we require is a completely different orientation to look at individual, to understand his humanity. This is a concept which is related to M.N. Roy's thought, and whatever that he seeks to discuss as a part of his ideas of radical humanism is related to a blend of Marxism and humanism as well. Okay. సరే ఇక్కడికి ఆపేద్దామా? సరే ఓకే, ఇదైతే పెట్టి ఇప్పటిదాకా అయితే చేసింది ఎడిటింగ్ చేసి పెట్టేసేమనండి. చాలాసేపు అయింది యాక్చువల్గా. Looking at section B, there are a lot of concepts which are asked in section B as well. A is what is called as constitutional morality in the Indian Constitution. Now, this has been a concept which has also been discussed a lot of times in recent years. The concept of constitutional morality indicates that the Constitution should be interpreted in light of the underlying principles which capture the very essence of the Constitution, which constitute the very heart of the Indian Constitution, rather than taking the Constitution as a legal document and looking at merely the words of the law. Okay, it is not the words of the law that you should actually focus upon when you're trying to interpret the Constitution. You should try to understand the Constitution based on underlying principles. These underlying principles can be ascertained through several principles that we have in the Constitution as expressed in the preamble to the Indian Constitution. For example, secularism is an underlying idea, socialism is an underlying idea prior to the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. Okay, the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act incorporated these terms into the Indian Constitution. However, the constitutional morality indicated the secular bent of the Indian Constitution. Okay, so this is the underlying principle of the Constitution, though it was not there prior to the 42nd Amendment Act. Now, this is the idea of constitutional morality. When interpreting the Constitution, when in trying to understand the Constitution, the essence of the Constitution rather than the words should be taken into consideration. The terms like rule of law is not there in the Constitution, but it's still very much a part and parcel of constitutional morality. Okay, so this is what we mean by constitutional morality. This you're supposed to explain in about 150 words, which is of course a very easy concept. Secondly, objectives resolution of the Constituent Assembly. Okay, so trying to explain about the objectives resolution and trying to tell what the role the objectives resolution had in the guiding of Constituent Assembly. Okay, you know that a lot of principles that were incorporated in the objectives resolution influenced in a very big way the drafting of the Indian Constitution. These very principles forms the essence behind the various articles, isn't it? For example, democracy as mentioned in the objectives resolution, propelled the Constituent Assembly to create the basic legal infrastructure through the Constitution for establishing a democratic form of government. So objectives resolution in this way can be considered as the beacon light of the Constituent Assembly. Okay, that was the role played by the objectives resolution. It gave a sense of purpose and direction to the Constituent Assembly. So here you're supposed to mention about the role of objectives resolution in guiding the work of the Constituent Assembly. Okay. Thirdly, the legal remedies in part 3 of the Indian Constitution. The legal remedies in part 3 of the Indian Constitution. He here clearly mentioned in part 3. Okay. The legal remedies in part 3. Okay. So in part 3 we have certain legal remedies, okay, in the form of what are called by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar as extraordinary remedies. Okay. So here you are supposed to mention about extraordinary remedies provided in part 3 of the Indian Constitution for protection of fundamental rights. Extraordinary remedies lie in the form of the writs. Okay. These are extraordinary remedies primarily because part 3 under Article 32 helps us to approach the highest court of the land, Supreme Court, directly if in case a fundamental right is violated. That's an extraordinary remedy. Now, ordinary remedy lies in the form of approaching the normal process of law through subordinate courts and then appealing before the higher courts, right? But if in case a fundamental right is violated, a remedy lies in the form of an extraordinary remedy. That is a fundamental right itself to move the highest court of land, Supreme Court, directly. That is an extraordinary remedy provided in part 3. This is what you will have to mention, the special feature of the remedy available in part 3 is what you will have to capture in your answer. The special feature. Okay. Next, relevance of legislative council. Now, this is also a topic which has been discussed a lot of times in recent times. A lot of people consider that legislative councils have become defunct. They are acting as sometimes obstructionist bodies, particularly when there is a change of government. For example, in the state of Andhra Pradesh recently we had the YSRCP government, which had a very thumping majority in the previous assembly elections. Therefore, the very high number of members in the legislative council were members belonging to YSRCP. But then in the recent election, it was the coalition of TDP, BJP and Janasena party which secured majority number of seats. A thumping majority was secured by this coalition in the recent elections. However, legislative council continued to be still continuing with members who are of YSRCP. The majority of the members in the legislative council continue to be members of YSRCP. Therefore, these members could play an obstructionist role, okay, to the newly formed government. Notwithstanding the fact that legislative councils do not have a very big role and they cannot even obstruct the passage of a bill that was proposed and that was passed by legislative council. Okay, it can only act as a dilatory chamber, that is, impose a little delay in the passage of a bill. Therefore, there are no effective powers to legislative councils, and a lot of people consider that these legislative councils have become asylums for political refugees who lost elections. For political refugees, they have become asylums for political refugees. Such kind of comments are being made about the relevance of legislative council. In this context, you are supposed to write a note on relevance, whether you consider them relevant or whether you consider them irrelevant or not. Okay. Today, there is a lot of debate which is favoring the idea that legislative councils have far outlived their utility in states. Okay. They are not able to play a very big role, and they are not able to act as a check on irresponsible or ill-conceived proposals of legislation passed by assembly. Okay. So, in this context, a lot of discussion is going on whether the legislative councils are relevant at all or not. Okay. So, it is this that you will have to speak about. And secondly, another question that is asked is women's role in anti-Iraq movements. Okay. Now you know that not in recent times, even in early 80s also, there were a lot of movements that were spearheaded by women against Iraq, even in the state of Andhra Pradesh as well, which ultimately led to the imposition of prohibition in the state of Andhra Pradesh. We also had seen such anti-Iraq movements in several North Indian states, in Rajasthan for example. Okay. However, you know that though the anti-Iraq movements themselves have not secured significant victories, women's role in public life, however, has increased. Okay, the ability of women to organize political movements, the ability of women to assume leadership of several movements, primarily because anti-Iraq movement is women-centered movement, because women primarily are victims of the practice of consumption of liquor and Iraq, particularly in rural areas. Therefore, this is primarily a women's based issue. Okay, so it was in this movement that women's role in assuming leadership for popular movements was first realized. Okay, so whether women will be able to assume leadership, whether women will be able to organize social movements, whether women will be able to realize their political demands through the social movements, were all subjected to test because of these anti-Iraq movements. And that's the reason why these anti-Iraq movements have become a subject of great interest and even review and study by a good number of social groups in India, okay, or excuse me, research groups in India, right? And that's the reason why this had been asked. Okay. The next question is the sixth question, and the question is, how far do you agree that directive principles of state policy are more fundamental than fundamental rights in meeting socio-economic justice as mentioned in the preamble to the Indian Constitution? Okay. Now the question appears to be very big, but actually it's a very simple and a straightforward question. Okay. Now you know that aim of directive principles of state policy is to realize social and economic democracy. Social and economic democracy. Okay. While the aim of fundamental rights is to realize political democracy. Okay. However, there are certain provisions within fundamental rights, okay, which help us realize social justice. For example, a right to equal protection of laws allows state to classify individuals, to identify the more vulnerable sections and to accord them a greater amount of protection. Okay, so that would be a means through which social justice can be realized. Okay, so provisions like prohibition of untouchability, provisions like prohibition of child labor or bonded labor or forced labor, all these are aimed at realizing a just social order, right? So there are provisions within fundamental rights which are enforceable by courts to realize social justice, along with directive principles of state policy. Directive principles of state policy have a series of provisions which help in realizing socio-economic justice. Okay, right? For example, socio-economic justice in the form of reduction of concentration of wealth, providing equal access to justice, or ensuring the removal of disabilities and ensuring equal opportunities for the vulnerable sections like scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. All these are there as a part of directive principles of state policy. Okay, so there are provisions in fundamental rights as well as in directive principles which aim at realizing certain socio-economic objectives and socio-economic justice. That's the truth. Okay. However, he is asking us to assess whether directive principles of state policy are more fundamental than fundamental rights. Which do you think play a bigger amount of role? Okay. Now, please remember that notwithstanding the fact that fundamental rights are justiciable and directive principles are non-justiciable, both the part 3 related to fundamental rights and part 4 of directive principles are considered to be at balance with each other. Okay. So, that idea that one is justiciable, the other is not justiciable is not to be taken into consideration, because both these provisions are considered to be at balance with each other, and both of them together help realize socio-economic justice. Okay? Whether fundamental rights are superior to directive principles or whether directive principles play a greater amount of role over fundamental rights is not the question at all here. Okay? Now, this is what you are supposed to write as a part of conclusion in your answer, that both fundamental rights and directive principles together constitute a single continuum which help us realize socio-economic justice in India. And both of them have their own specific role to play. Okay? So, this is what you are supposed to write. Okay? This is the question. I mean, when we look at the question paper as far as political science and international relations is concerned, the various questions give us an indication that the questions are very straight, though there are a few tricky questions here and there, as we discussed a few minutes earlier, but the most of the paper is very much manageable and within the reach of students. If you have done your work well, if you have completed the syllabus, and if you have got proper clarity on the concepts, then this paper should not be a challenge at all. Okay? But provided, of course, the thing is that you are supposed to have clarity on these concepts. Okay? So, with this analysis, I'd like to leave you with your own judgments and with your own ideas about this paper. Okay? And I'd like to bring to your notice that the first hand impression on paper 2 of PSIR also will be given to you in a few minutes from now. So, just go about looking at this paper, understand the essence, understand the questions, understand the drift of the questions, understand the difficulty level of the questions, and prepare likewise. My best wishes to you all, my dear friends. Thank you so much.